Spooky season has well and truly started. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to sum up all of the books I read in September and also a little bit of August, just so that my wrap up includes everything I've read since my thriller July wrap up. I've already done a couple of individual videos about some of these books, so I'm going to speed through them, but I'll give you a little wrap up nonetheless of those two. The first of which is Blood Over Brighthaven, which I read in August during the process of moving house, and I kind of vlogged the whole experience of reading it, all of the twists and turns, and reacted along the way. Now, I really enjoyed this book. I think it was like just about worth the hype. However, I did kind of see the twists coming. I think it took me by surprise a little bit, but because I knew there was a big twist about what the blight was, it didn't like come completely out of left field. I thought overall this book had a strong message about colonialism. It was quite heavy handed as far as metaphors go, but I do think that actually worked really well, and it was applicable to not just thinking about colonialism or our impacts on the world in like one sense, but it made me think about, you know, eating animals and like reading it from a vegan standpoint. I'm not vegan, but I think that if you could see the animals getting euthanized, slaughtered in slaughterhouses at the time when you sit down to eat an animal product, it probably would put you off. And this book kind of asks you that question, like, how would you react if you saw all of the negative consequences of your actions, like real, tangibly? And I think that's a really important question because while the kind of obvious answer is that you would change your behavior, I think in a very real sense, lots of people wouldn't change their behavior or they wouldn't permanently change their behavior. And as someone that works in like human behavior change as a job, like that's a very interesting question to me, especially when you start to bring in politics and animal welfare and welfare for people and all of these very charged topics. So I did like this one, and it was quite dark academia fantasy, so it was almost quite on theme for a lot of the other books in this stack. There's a bit of a dark academia theme in like 4 out of 5 of the books that I'm talking about today. So school is back in session apparently for September. Another book that I read in September that I've already done a video about is Katabasis. I had some nice things to say about this book as well, but also a lot of bit of a rant too. I don't think this book was as good as it could have been. I thought it could have been edited better. I thought the characterization and the development of the love story and the arc there was spoiled a bit, pacing wise. I don't want to spoil the book for anyone that's not read it. But if you want to hear my full thoughts, go over to my other video all about it, where I get into heavy spoilers. But like to sum up my thoughts on it, I mean there was good aspects of the story and there was aspects that could have been improved. It's a story about two colleagues that go into hell to find their academic advisor who's recently been killed, and they have a bit of a love story along the way, even though they were kind of academic rivals. And it sort of parallels how being in academia is a little bit like being in hell and critiques academia, but it doesn't go like too hard in its critique of academia, if you know what I mean. And it also doesn't go too hard on like hell, like it doesn't feel that bad for hell as far as hell goes. I don't know. I had fun for like 200 pages and then the rest was like a little bit of a slog, honestly. But if you read it, let me know in the comments what you thought of it without spoilers. Now that those two that I've already reviewed in other videos are out the way, let's turn the clocks back to August/September when I read The Will of the Many. This took me a couple of weeks to get through. Quite a chunky book, especially for me. This book is nearly 600 pages, and I've read quite a lot of books around that mark. You know, I've read Court of Silver Flames and Kingdom of Ash that are a little bit longer, but those were much quicker reads. This, you know, being a hardback, it's got a lot more words to page, it's got kind of smaller text. So if you kind of printed it, the way the Sarah J. Maas books are printed, I feel like that would be like 700 or 800 pages, honestly. So I felt like it was a little deceptively big. But I did really enjoy this book. It was kind of heavily inspired by ancient Rome. In it, we have a main character who has a secret identity, and his family were basically massacred by the hierarchy, which is the governing body of this ancient Rome style society. Very similar to the way the Roman Empire expanded and kind of colonized a lot of Europe and Africa and Asia at the time. There is a magic system in this whereby everyone is organized and put somewhere on this hierarchy. Most people are in the bottom tier and it goes up kind of like a big pyramid scheme. and the people at the top cede will from people on the bottom and in all of the lower ranks to them. And that essentially makes them kind of tired and sluggish, and they just lack will, basically. I didn't really notice any kind of hindrance to ceding will for people that were on the hierarchy. There seemed to be a hindrance for people that were octavy who didn't get will from anyone but ceded their will to everyone. And they even had this kind of sinister concept of people who were criminals, they would be put in these sappers, which basically rendered them not unconscious, but basically immobile, and it would just cede all of their will. So they were conscious, but it was like they were living in a mental prison, kind of like being conscious but in a coma. And they would just lie on these slabs for years, ceding their will, and it was kind of torture for them. And I thought all of this was a really interesting concept. There's kind of a rebel group in here as well that's introduced, and they kind of massacre a lot of normal kind of Octavie people and justify this by saying by, consenting to give their will and by living in this system with the hopes of being able to rise up, they're enabling a lot of injustice and a lot of inequality, which is an interesting take and kind of true, but also their methods of being very violent were morally questionable, obviously. Through some of the events that happen, we see that when a lot of Octavia are killed, it can kind of dismantle things at the top because, whole pyramids were kind of relying on that group of people's will. So when that will is no longer there because the person has died, everything kind of collapses, which, does say something about how when all of the kind of working class, if they were to leave or be dismantled in some way, it would no longer prop up the wealthy. So it does have a lot to say about capitalism, I guess, and hierarchies in society in general. But to be honest, I didn't like overly politically engage with this book. I felt like I enjoyed it, but I didn't completely connect with the characters. I also didn't overly connect with like the plot or the journey of the book. But none of that is to say that it's a bad book by any means. I mean, it's got loads of praise, and I think it was really well written and it was really well executed. I think maybe this just wasn't for me, or I just wasn't in the right headspace for this book. I kind of had a lot going on, just moved into a house. I wanted like a book that I would be really obsessed with and really consuming, kind of Hunger Games style. And I thought this could be similar because Hunger Games is also very inspired by the Romans. And even in The Will of the Many, they have kind of gladiatorial contests. He fights in these kind of wrestling matches and stuff near the beginning. So, I thought I would enjoy it as much as the Hunger Games potentially, but it just didn't quite get there for me. And I feel like that's a bit of shame, and I feel a bit bad about it just not hitting for me, but I think sometimes that just happens, and it's like, it's not the book's fault, it's not the writing's fault, it's not my fault, it's just, it kind of is what it is. I'm not sure whether I'm going to read the next one. I was so close to pre-ordering it, blind, just assuming that I would love this, but I only just liked it. I liked it quite a lot, but I don't think I liked it enough to read the sequel, and that's frustrating. So now I don't know because I feel very completionist about it. Like, I want to find out what happens, but like, do I care? Do I organically care about what happens? I think I'm just going to sit on it a while and see, maybe once I've got through some of the books I'm really excited to read next, maybe if I have a little bit of a slump, I'll be like, you know what? I actually do want to find out what happens. At which point, probably the paperback will be out, and then I'll have a series that just doesn't match. I hate when you've got a series and you've got half in paperback and half in hardback. It does my head in. But we shall see. I don't want to waste my money and just be a like consumerist asshole about buying stuff if I don't care or I'm not going to read it. But maybe I'll wait, see what the reviews are, see if it gets good reviews, see if people like the direction the story's going, and then make up my mind then. I think when I'd first finished it, I was very much like, no, I think I'm done. Like, I've been reading it for 2 weeks. It was quite a slow read for me, and I just kind of thought, I'm not interested in the next one. But now that like a few weeks have passed and I'm talking about it again, I am a bit more like, oh yeah, that was interesting. That plot point was interesting. I guess a lot happened and it was quite exciting. So I have warmed to it almost as time has gone on. This was one of the first books I've read over the past year where I haven't had a lot to say when I finished it, and I've been doing this channel for a year. I've been pretty much until recently filming a review about every single book that I read. But when it came to this one, I was just like, nah, like I can't be arsed. I can't be arsed. Don't talk to me about it. Like I don't want to talk about it. And that's not because there's nothing to say, because there's lots politically to say. But I'm almost burnt out with like talking about books. So I'm going to blame my burnout and not necessarily the book. Because if it had been like 6 months ago, I probably would have engaged with it a lot more and come on here and did a whole kind of essay about class systems and about this whole will seeding system. But for now, that's all I'm going to say because I just I don't want to. For some reason, don't want to talk about it. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some books can just be you read it and you don't think critically and then you just move on and you just need a bit of a break. But I think it's a shame that that's happened with this book in particular because you know, I don't think it's a passive book. I think there's lots to say about it, and there's other books that are designed to be read more passively and just enjoyed. So, yeah, we shall see about the strength of the few, but I'm not making any promises. Next, we have the only paperback on the list. I read Hellbent by Lee Berdugo, finally. I loved this. I read Ninth House last year. I really enjoyed it, and same time of year, September, October rolls around again, and I'm like, yes, I can finally read this because last year, after reading Ninth House, I went on like a sunny holiday, and I was like, you know what? It's not the time for a book about the descent into hell and being at Yale in the autumn because I was like in Dubrovnik. So I basically felt like I had to wait a whole year for the vibes to roll back around. And I'm glad that I did because it at least bridges the gap between the next book coming out. I think it's coming out in 2026, but I don't think it's been announced yet. So we might still be waiting a while. And it was worth the wait. I think a lot of it was quite similar to the first book. There was a lot of, it very much like just continued on, and it was very similar vibe. Maybe if I'd read them back to back, it would have felt like too much of the same. But because I had that nice break, I came in fresh and like ready for that same thing again. I really enjoyed the setting and the vibes of this story. I also love how there's always layers of different mysteries going on. I think Ninth House had like 4 or 5 different mysteries as part of it. This one had a little bit less. The timeline switching, it was also present in this book, but again, less than in Ninth House. And with this book, we had a little bit of a repetitive aspect of like trying to go to hell and a few like roadblocks in the way. So we didn't spend as much time in hell as I was expecting. I thought Hellbent and Catabasis would be like maybe too similar and a bit of an issue to read back to back. But like Catabasis is like entirely in hell, and then this one is mostly in the real world with like little visits to hell. And it also wasn't very, a fire and brimstone, a journey through hell. It was kind of a dip in and out, which was fine. I was okay with it, but I did want to see maybe a bit more hell from, the title. But I think what makes this book and this series really strong is that I really like the characters. I love Darlington. His change is going to be interesting to read about going forward as we go into the rest of the series. I like Alex. I think she's a really cool character. Dawes is a cool character. I like Turner as well. And even though these books have like quite dark subject matter and they can get quite violent and they are dark, it still has like a cozy vibe about it for some reason. Like they'll go into the house, Leith house, and like make soup and cuddle up in blankets and do their research and go to the library. So I love it. It's like cozy, dark, and entertaining, which is just the perfect vibe and just what I was looking for a dark academia. I know there's lots of dark academias that aren't like that and aren't paranormal, but like this book, it's just so fun and I can't wait for the next one, honestly. And then the final book I read in September was Uncharmed by Lucy Jane Wood. This is a beautiful edition and it's got the lovely sprayed edges because it's the Waterstones exclusive edition. And this was a cozy pumpkin spice latte of a book. I thought it would be a nice break from all of the dark descents into hell to just have something where I could turn my brain off a little and just relax and be given the message of you know what? Everything's fine and you don't need to try too hard to be perfect. This book is about Annie Wildwood, and she basically takes a potion every night that makes her perfect, and she's got some things in her background that makes her want to strive to be perfect all of the time. She's always trying to live her life in the perfect way and be there for others in the right way. And then she meets this young witch that she has to mentor and learns to let go of perfection a little bit. And it's kind of like a Gilmore Girls found family. There's like a romance in there. It's very Disney. It's very 90s witchy vibes. They spend a lot of the story in this cottage, and when I say it's Disney, it's literally she's like a Disney princess. At one point she's singing and there's animals all around her, just like Snow White. And it's a bit much sometimes. It's That's just kind of the tone of the book though. You just have to ride with it. If Lucy can make it cute and cozy, she will. And it creates the kind of book that you just need to have a blanket and a cinnamon swirl and a hot chocolate and sit and read it. It's just that kind of vibe. This book is set in the same world as Uncharmed, which is her first book, which I reviewed last year about the same time. And I do think Uncharmed was a little bit better, even though I maybe resonated with the themes of Uncharmed a little bit more. I did have some criticisms of Rewitched that kind of hold up with Uncharmed as well. I think the pacing was, a little bit slow. I think it could have been a bit shorter. For example, everything that it tells you in the blurb of, she's perfect and she's going to mentor this person and she's going to meet Hal and they're going to live in this cottage. That's kind of all in the blurb, but yeah, it takes about 150 pages to get to that point. So it's not giving you anything new for a while. You're just kind of in the world and enjoying it and having a nice time. And saying that, I did enjoy the first part of this book. I think the second half, it kind of falls through a little bit, and I was just a bit less engaged with the plot. I also think tonally, the issues that I had with Rewitched are the same here. For example, the main character is in their 30s, they're 30, 32 in this case, and they're dealing with an issue that lots of 30, 32 year olds face of of trying to be too perfect, for example. But the tone of the story, because it's so cozy and so Disney almost, it feels too convenient, too nice, and it just feels like it's written for a younger adult audience. It could be appropriate for middle grade if it wasn't for the little sparklings of romance. But then it's obviously marketed at 30-year-olds. And it never really challenges those toxic aspects of the personality. So in Rewitched, you know, Belle is not reaching her full potential, and it's actually very frustrating and annoying to read, and made me kind of angry because I was like, come on girl, you're 30, you need to get your shit together. And in this, she's 32 and she's too perfect, and she learns that actually she's perfect just the way she is. Um and that's very nice. But also I think that striving to be perfect is something that's so common and such a common issue that deserves to be delved into with a bit more depth. I don't necessarily want a book to just say it's okay, wrap me in a blanket and be like, oh, little poppets, you will be fine, and actually you're perfect the way you are. I kind of want a book that challenges me and says yeah, you're not perfect, and that's fine. Maybe you actually have many flaws, maybe you actually kind of suck or have some bad traits, but that's still okay, and you can upset people and you can rock the boat sometimes, and that's okay. I feel like it could have gone a bit deeper than her just looking a bit disheveled, or always having the perfect friendly response, or her showing oh, a little bit of frustration, god forbid. And pacing wise, she is trying to be perfect, and she is being perfect because she's using a potion for two-thirds of the novel maybe, and then a little bit of spoiler here, but she stops using the potion, and then she doesn't use it again. So it's like the easiest overcoming of an addiction ever. It's just like stopping cold turkey. And like, sure, there's a few problems with that, and that she looks messy and she's a bit more clumsy, but like, it's not this big overhaul that it should be. The premise of the novel is also that like she gets paired up with this troubled teen and has to like coach her to control her magic. And they do this. The teen is a bit troubled. They hit it off like fairly well straight away. There's just a few clashing moments. They have a couple of arguments with like the first two chapters they're together, and then after that it's pretty much smooth sailing, and they get they're pretty happy with each other, and that's fine. And it's like 3 weeks go by, and they're suddenly like this family that all love each other. All because she wants to set the book from like 1st of October to Halloween, and she did the same with Rewitched. And it means that the character development, the changes in the character, and the changes of the relationship is all very quick. And I felt like that with Rewitched as well. Like they had this big challenge to overcome. That was the setup, and then 2 to 3 weeks of just studying, and they overcome it. And I'm like, oh, cool, that worked out. And there's some other like vague peril with like other people, which I won't spoil, but like the inner conflict is wrapped up quite nicely. However, maybe this problem is just with me, and that's just like how cozy fantasy is. And there's probably lots of books that critique adults and be like, let's look at perfectionism through this lens. And this book is actually maybe needed in the space to say, actually, you are okay. And here's a hot chocolate, pop it. And, don't worry, kitten. Maybe that's needed. And I'm sure lots of people love that about this book specifically and about Rewitched. So I'm the problem, it's me, I guess. I think the pacing is a legitimate problem, but the tone and the message, it's just me that's having the problem with that, I think. But let me know what you thought if you read Uncharmed or any of the other books in this stack. Let me know your thoughts, and I will be back next month with another wrap up. Next week, probably with another video, but next month with a wrap up of, you know, I'm reading Silvercloak at the moment and I'm loving it. I'm going to do a video dedicated to that because I'm not finished yet, but I think it might be my like first or only 5-star read of the year. Stay tuned for that. And after that, I'm going to be reading lots more horror because we're getting closer to Halloween. So I will see you in the next one. Let me know what you're reading for spooky season in the comments, and stay cozy and stay safe from the ghoulies. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much, by the way, for all of the nice comments on my last video in which I was wigging out about how poorly YouTube has been going. Got a few more subscribers, got some encouraging words. You have no idea how much I appreciate it, so thank you, and subscribe for more. Bye!